within other countries, like certain Southeast Asian countries, restrictions were actually tightened with Jupiter going into Pisces. They did not let go of mask mandates. Somebody I follow on Twitter who lives in Iceland said that because Iceland has a Libra rising and Pisces is the sixth house of health, the sixth house deals with your health routines, and because Iceland had Pisces in the sixth house, when Jupiter went there, they actually expanded restrictions. So all of humanity has not been on the same page with this. And so the Aquarius energy of like collaboration and collective shared responsibility is not really there. That community coming together because everybody's hyper focused on themselves and because of greed and people not wanting to sacrifice or, and I don't mean sacrifice like in a codependent way. I know sometimes people have a word problem with that word. That word actually means to make sacred. When you're giving up something or you're making way for something or someone sacred to come through or some sacred work to work through you to receive help and assistance and guidance. So uh, there is this focus on greed as we're seeing that's continuing to happen, and community and indigenous wisdom, which thrives on collaboration and relationships and alliance, which is Libra and Aquarius energy, is what is going to get us out of this. More than any one thing, more than individual vaccines or individual immune system boosting, we really need the Aquarius alliance energy to be able to collaborate on a global scale to get this, to work through this, right? And we're seeing a lot of death, right? We're seeing with the South Node in Scorpio, we are seeing physical death from people dying from COVID. We're seeing people grieve pre pandemic life, the death of pre pandemic life. And systems are starting to collapse because people are protesting, people are tired. There's strikes, there's more strikes at various companies. There's various ways in which academia is starting to fall apart. And so people are scared, but for marginalized people, this whole post apocalyptic and all this type of stuff, the apocalypse for us started when Christopher Columbus sailed and came to the Americas and started slaughtering indigenous peoples here and stole indigenous Africans and forced them to come here, right? We have people in low income communities that have been dealing with food insecurity for a while now. We have people in Flint, people in reservations who don't have clean water. When I visited my godfather in Dallas Fort Worth in 2011, we had to ration the water. There was only certain hours of the day that we could take a shower or cook because the droughts were just that bad. So what happens though is people are so hyper individualist as a result of capitalist conditioning that they only care about a problem when it comes knocking on their own door. And if that's how we're going to continue to operate through the climate crisis, we are not going to make it, right? Um, I've noticed a connection between patriarchy and climate crisis. And it stood out to me a lot this past week with it just seemed like every day in my feed there was something related to women and how women are treated by men in disempowering ways. From Lizzo and her body, and like this way in which women are just supposed to be there for extraction and exploitation. It's very similar to the way um, capitalism and colonialism just destructs and exploits nature, right? And I would see just like the discardment. People just discard things in nature if it's not important to them or not desirable to them. I saw that happen with Lizzo, who was plant based and vegan, and she's being made fun of and discarded because of fat phobia. But we have other smaller celebrities who post themselves eating junk food and no one's saying anything about them. I saw a woman sharing stories about their abusive boyfriends, whether it was emotional abuse, financial abuse, guys taking money, physical abuse, and just the overall ways in which men have extracted from women and want women to be in a subservient place where they can just take, and the woman has to be in a specific position. Also saw that with OnlyFans, how men were reacting to that and wanting sex workers to have to be a certain way and wanting to have control over them. And me personally, I've always been someone who's created safe spaces for women and non-binary people. Had a healing circle for women and non-binary folks at my senior year at Howard, and just moved to General in DC after I graduated. And I've always been vocal about the problematic things men do, cishet men in particular, and also cishet black men, because I tend to be more around black people. And there are women who have divested from cishet men. They don't date them, they are not friends with them. And as of wherever I was of these issues with men, and I spoke on them and I would check them, I also experienced, all these traumas and stuff and mistreatment from men too and stuff growing up and just in undergrad as well, and just witnessing that in some of my friends, witnessing that in women that I knew in the community. It's just a rampant thing. But I never divested, especially from cishet black men, because I was like, well, we still share our cultural roots, and I still have hope that they can do their own healing work. But they don't really show up to spaces, even, kid-friendly spaces where there's, like, various healing activities for different ages. There are very few cishet men there, if any, that I've noticed just being in healing community spaces over the years. And sometimes in the spaces where men were, sometimes in those spaces there would be like homophobia sometimes, or just expectations of women to be a certain way. And so the woman that would be there kind of believed those things the men were saying. And so I just don't really, I personally don't have like people that I could list right now that I know personally to be like, oh, you can go to this man spiritual reader person to do this or whatever. Like, I don't have men as friends or acquaintances or romantic partners to be able to vouch for them. And just seeing women share their stories about different things, and then a couple of days after that, the OnlyFans thing came. It was just a lot of patriarchy issues, and I saw that connection with the way men are extractive with women, and just the way capitalism is just extractive and destructive of nature. And even in New Age spirituality, we see it as well too, with people who like go to Peru and they do ayahuasca and they're like, oh, I feel, even people who don't do like psychoactive stuff, but just are spiritual people who meditate in nature or do sound healing, they are doing these things, but they're doing it in an extractive way that is just selfish, where they're just feeling something good, but not actually being in community with the lineage of people who cultivated those practices that they're studying and using. They're not actually being in community with the land, acknowledging the indigenous names, and looking to the indigenous ancestors and indigenous nature spirits that guard the nature and land that they're on, that makes them feel so good, right? And this South Node in Sagittarius, with Sagittarius being religion, philosophy, and spiritual beliefs, is showing where we are experiencing or seeing people be extractive with spirituality, and in some ways just using dogma and spirituality to repackage capitalism or bootstrap rhetoric. You're just not trying hard enough. And that isn't using spirituality to face problems. That's using spirituality to deny a problem that's facing you and not do the work to fix it. By saying, oh, that's not my reality, or I don't care about that because I just say my positive affirmations and do what works for me, you're not practicing true spirituality, which is about interconnectedness. If you're doing these practices but not honoring the lineages or not giving back to the communities, then what are you really doing, right? And so we have to change this relationship with nature. And even though things are dying, I see indigenous ways being rebirthed. Scorpio is not just death, it's rebirth. I'm seeing indigenous ways being reborn. So even though these shifts and these transitions, as the old world is collapsing and a new one is being formed, is challenging, I am less fearful about things collapsing and the crisis, and I'm more hopeful for indigenous wisdom that guides most of the world's biodiversity to be upheld. I am hopeful for us connecting to our indigenous ancestors to guide us through various issues. I am very hopeful, you know. I'm hesitant, I would say, about some people who may have spiritual information and may be using it the wrong way. But by telling people to tap into that North Node in Gemini to really question things, because Gemini can be curious and think for themselves, I think we may be able to be planting seeds of more awareness of self. And another thing that I want to talk about is creating narratives for these planets that are the malefic planets that can be more holistic. When I was talking about Abaluaye earlier, who many have equated to Saturn, I don't think orishas or deities from any culture could be exactly as a planet, because planets kind of, to me, transcend any one culture, right? Greco-Roman understandings of Venus is not the only understandings of Venus. So I can't say that Venus is actually Venus, right? Venus, she's so much more. She's the relative force. She is, or it is, when we're talking about it on a cosmic level rather than the feminine deity in Rome and Greece and all that, and Aphrodite. I don't think the planets have genders. I think deities may have them, depending on what culture you're looking at, but I think planets transcend that and integrate them, because within each planet is a sign from each gender. And in a lot of indigenous societies, when you do get to deity levels or spirit guide levels or Risha, Loa, most of them have multiple, not just multiple genders, but multiple paths or multiple personalities, multiple responsibilities that they do. And so by calling Saturn, an assister that can help with emergencies, because Aquarius can help with emergencies, or the structure and discipline to maintain your reality and to construct strong foundations in your reality, to master things, that is a narrative or a framing that I feel like is more helpful and helps us have a more authentic relationship to the malefics. The malefics are not bad. They provide us with tools to help us with malefic circumstances that may arise in our lives. And when we start looking at Saturn in this way, Saturn can be an ally rather than be seen as this planet that has all these limitations or upheavals, right? And we're thinking about a planet that holds water, Aquarius being the water bearer, and there was an article about Saturn having a lot of water in its core, slushing around. And Saturn's usually been described as very rigid. So this article about it having the water slushing around was interesting for some people, but even before seeing this article, I had to already make a connection about water and emotional energy, which is often represented by water and astral, and Saturn, because I natally have my moon opposed my Saturn. So I have my emotional body in opposition to Saturn, and in tropical, the moon's in Virgo, and Saturn's in Pisces. In sidereal, it's Leo and Aquarius, and the Saturn is retro, just like Saturn is retro right now. And I think that Saturn can benefit from retrograde energy because it likes looking over things and taking its time to master situations, and seeing Saturn as a planet that can provide tools for assistance during crisis and provide guidance for what can create stability. That's a very nurturing quality to me and makes sense about holding water, being a container of resources that can help maintain and hold life, because water is often seen as life, right? This life-giving force. And what helps me to understand my moon opposed Saturn opposition, and I also saw this in studying mental health over the years, is that it's not that Saturn or Cap or Aquarius can't feel. This moon Saturn opposition is not about emotions being messy and Saturn not wanting me to feel anything, which is kind of how it was internalized as I was growing up, even before I knew anything about astro. Is that Saturn wants certain conditions that are more secure physically for me before I can tap into this emotional state, right? It's about creating security. This is where Cancer and Cap are related. They're both into security, right? So the Capricorn is just those things that you maybe need to be physically secure, like maybe a timing issue, like maybe to have emotional release rituals at a certain time that is more suited with the body, or having physical things that can help facilitate the emotional process so it won't be too overwhelming on the body, like essential oils, and just more structure around catering and caring for emotions. This does not make Saturn and Capricorn cold. It's just showing that the nurturing and emotional and intuitive element is expressed in these practical, externally securing ways, right? And even thinking about Aquarius holding water, Aquarius can come when there's upheaval and all of these storms or things like that, yes, but what is Aquarius also? It is the aid, the humanitarian aid that is given. It's the person bringing the blankets. It's the person coordinating care to make sure people get resources and food and water in an emergency, to get warm blankets, to get what people need to survive. And what are those needs? What are those resources that Aquarius is providing? That's Taurus, right? So there's this connection there between the Aquarius and the Taurus square. The Aquarius distributes the Taurus resources that can nurture our bodies during these emergency situations. This is Aquarius is Taurus's highest place. It's 10th place, 10th house. And another connection between Taurus and Aquarius, and we are seeing this in both tropical and sidereal. So in sidereal, we are seeing this through the through Uranus and Saturn squaring. No, that is tropical. So Uranus and Saturn squaring in tropical, Uranus and Taurus, Saturn and Aquarius. And then in sidereal, we have Jupiter in Aquarius is squaring the sidereal dwarf node. So this is really about the tension between comfort and new innovative things. And that is the initial tension. I don't know about that new technological advice. I'm comfortable with just using what I have now, right? But when you actually look at it a little bit deeper, the innovation of Aquarius serves Taurus needs. Because now that we've invented this technological device of this tractor, you can spend less time working all day, and now you can have an extra hour or two to tend to the pleasures of the five senses of your body and rest, right? Which is what Venus Taurus energy does. So this is how Aquarius can assist Taurus. And we're seeing that in this square. And we're seeing that what is revolutionary right now in a very fast-paced society, and just bringing your awareness in here about what can assist us with revolution and innovation. In a society that's so fast-paced, that doesn't allow you to rest and tune in with your body or receive any pleasure from your five senses, and tune into the wisdom of what your body's communicating it to you, that is actually going to be our ally. That is actually going to be our tool. Slowing down. And that is going to be the radical thing to do in a society where we speeding up all the time, is what has been pushed. Slowing down and tuning into our bodies. Cutting back a couple of hours from work where we can to rest and tune in to see what our bodies are communicating to us. And really just training our five senses again. Because as we start to connect with nature more, our hearing, our sight, our taste, these are going to be things that we're going to need to be able to survive as all these shifts are happening. And people sometimes think that Taurus is, when the earth energies in general are not that spiritual, and that there's this disconnect from the spiritual and the physical. And it's like, we can connect to this Taurus energy by seeing the spiritual wisdom in nature and in our bodies that we've forgotten. That our bodies and all sorts of vessels that can receive and give us so much information. But it's been so stressed through trauma and all of these things. And we have to give it a chance to breathe and restore. And we see this in Aquarius. Like I said, it's like not just the upheaval, but it is the resources and the restoration after a storm or after the upheaval to help you get back in tune with yourself and your body authentically, right? That's what it's like to hold water, to hold life that is renewing of the self, right? And this is where Aquarius and Taurus can help each other again. Sometimes these emergency situations allow us to get the rest that's been long overdue, right? And the restoration that's been long overdue. And the spirits that are in nature, we can connect to them through Taurus and through nature. And there's this idea in a lot of New Age spirituality of like ascending, like, and leaving this matrix, and this earth is such a bad place. And yes, with the wars here and with the climate crisis and the injustices, it can feel like a bad place sometimes. But it's also a deeply spiritual place. Nature's giving us wisdom. It's not just giving us these destructive things. Nature does not have to be feared. From an indigenous perspective, we can revere it. In ancient Kemet, the god Hapi, which was an androgynous figure that was represented what we, in the Greco-Roman we call Aquarius energy. And he, well, it was she, really. But, because it was like a deity that had a beard but had breasts shown nurturings, and just merging of these different polarities in the body. That deity was prayed to prevent the floods of the Nile from being too destructive, to take people's homes and all of these things away. And we are going to have to attune our five senses to nature more, as we're dealing with what's going to be coming. And this whole thing about this earth being a matrix that we need to escape from, rather than a healing space where we can be rebirthing indigenous nature wisdom and experience nature in a more healing way, and the elements within ourselves in a more healing way, is being reinforced by these people trying to fly to Mars and all this type of stuff, and the Matrix. And the Matrix is not actually bad. A Matrix is just a sacred container. When you have bad people with bad intentions controlling a Matrix, that can be a problem. The Matrix in and of itself is not bad, and I see that in the Saturn energy and Capricorn energy. It's just as spiritual. You know, this Taurus, the Earth is just as spiritual. We can descend into the Earth, which is the more indigenous African perspective. I was reading about this in Healing Wisdom of Africa by Maladoma Patrice Soulmate the other day. And so, there's medicine here, there's indigenous medicine here, there's indigenous wisdom in the earth, there's history recorded in the earth from our indigenous ancestors who walked it before us that can help us through these things and create new realities as we face various challenges. So I think that this Saturnian holding of water, holding of life, this sacred matrix, this container, when you look at the etymology of matrix, it means origin, it means to hold together. It's connected to the word matrix that we see in math and these different brackets, and the words mastery, and it's connected to test in those ways. And so the tests are not really tests in terms of, oh, I want you to suffer, I want you to be brutal. It's, I want you to be able to be devoted enough to yourself and to your craft to be able to utilize these tools that I'm providing you. Saturn provides us the tools with the directives of what we need to do, what the sign it's in, our house it's in. And once we heed that through dedication, through patience, and through consistent effort, we reap the benefits from Saturn, and we see that Saturn is actually a sister and a guidance to us. And I'm not here on some, like, toxic positivity, anything. My moon opposed Saturn opposition with the 6th house really went through a lot when the South Node was in Pisces on my Saturn a couple of years ago, tropically opposing Jupiter and the North Node going over on my moon in the 12th. I had mobility issues. I was on disability accommodations for school. The doctors could not figure out anything that was wrong with me with all their scans and their tests. And once I started tapping into the medicine of that opposition was asking me on a spiritual level and just listening and studying, I realized Saturn has my back. And Saturn is trying to protect me from spaces that are not aligned with what gives me authority. Saturn deals with our authority. And right now, our authority with Saturn being in Aquarius tropically is coming from our ability to collaborate with others and form authentic communities that are based on just materialistic things, but on true shared values and a willingness to put in the work and the patience to build relationships and grow together through conflict and do the hard work of listening to opposing things and putting our skills together and everyone having a role in their community and in their niches that they're interested in, and building and connecting and communicating with people. North Node is in Gemini. So, this is what is being asked. Indigenous wisdom is relationship centered. Everything is through the lens of relationship. Through the Indigenous Mental Health, which is a budding volunteer run org that I'm forming with my team, we had an event, Kapwa Learning Gatherings. Kapwa is an indigenous Pinay, Filipinx term that signifies relationships and interconnections, relationships with ourselves, relationships with nature, relationships with each other, relationships with groups, relationships with information. When we see everything that we're facing as an opportunity for relationship learning and growth and meeting with each other within the self, so many opportunities can blossom and so many things can happen. So yeah, um, connect with nature, guys. Connect with your ancestors. Um, I am offering, I'm back in offering mediumship again. Um, I had sessions with my mediumship teacher and some fellow students recently that was really enlivening. And what I love most about mediumship is feeling the love that people's ancestors have for them during the readings. It's not the visions, not the things that I see and all this stuff. That's pretty cool. But my favorite part is just as I'm connecting with the spirit, I can feel how much love they can have for their client. And the Western world has, made ancestor work this this cursed thing, this demonized thing, and I saw this rhetoric with what happened in Haiti, you know, about Haiti being cursed, when really it's just on a fault line, and it's also a poor country that doesn't have good infrastructure to minimize impacts of earthquakes and all these things. And they want us to fear our ancestral practices and our ancestors. It was a tactic to brainwash us and take advantage of us and disempower us from the wisdom and power of our ancestors to help us. They are our first defense right now. Your ancestors are your first line of defense from an indigenous African perspective, looking for you, watching your back. And regardless of whether you were adopted, whether you have family trauma, everybody has an ancient lineage and everybody has some kind of wise guides that are assigned to them, and they know you, even if you don't know them, you know? And I think that with indigenous ways coming back, ancestors being a big part of that, they are going to be key in helping us with these new worlds. And there's so many ways to connect with your ancestors. They can really just use anything to connect with you. I'm going to leave an article there for people who may not want a reading right now, but you just want to connect with your ancestors on your own for some inspiration. And I hope everyone can connect to nature somehow. There are certain people that may be more called than others to work directly with nature conservation. I happened to have 3 clients last weekend who that was a theme for all 3 of them in some kind of way. But even on a basic level, just knowing the indigenous spirits that guard your land, just knowing what elements you connect to for yourself, for your own personal healing. Maybe you like connecting with water, or maybe you like connecting and sitting in front of a fire at the sun, just to help you to de-stress and connect to wisdom within your own body is important. From an indigenous perspective, they'll tell you that the land you're born on is with you wherever you go, because those spirits on that land witnessed your birth. And I was born on Piscataway and Anacoston's land, which is Washington, D.C. And anywhere I go, those spirits are going to be with me, in addition to my ancestral bloodline spirits and soul family spirits, because when I was leaving the spiritual realm and entering this realm through my mother's womb, it was Piscataway air that I was breathing. And what guides Piscataway air? This Piscataway spirits. So really, this Aquarius Taurus square is asking us to dissolve this separation that we're seeing between, spirit and knowledge being linear and in a book, and really understanding that Taurus can derive authority from Aquarius and vice versa, since they have that 4th house, 10th house connection. They're each other's authority, and we can get wisdom and knowledge and technology from nature, from Taurus, that first sign, by tuning into what nature is around us. So I hope that this was interesting. Like I said, at this point, I'm here for the return of indigenous wisdom to help us get through things. Even though these are challenging times, the end is near, but the beginning is also near. Saw a poster, a vintage poster of a Native American holding a sign that said the beginning is near. So that's what I'm feeling into.